turn it around and have a look at the writing that's been hiding underneath.
So no one's seen that writing for 4,000 or 5,000 years?
Yeah, the only person that's seen it previously is the one who wrote it.
What if everything we've been taught about the rise of human civilization is wrong? 6,000 years ago, a mysterious culture in ancient Iraq seemed to skip thousands of years of progress overnight.
Astronomical references, a moon, a star, various symbols, which even could be symbolized as a wristwatch. Technology being used 6,000 years ago.
Now, thanks to AI, their long-forgotten tablets are revealing something even crazier.
Have you seen the new scans where they've found new petroglyphs?
Yeah. The man, there's gonna be so much like that that's gonna be found. People are gonna be able
What
to.
is all that stuff?
References to cosmic cycles, advanced tech, and genetic codes. And when you hear what AI just uncovered in their latest translation, you'll be shocked. The strange civilization. What if the story of human civilization didn't start the way we think it did? 6,000 years ago, in a land between two great rivers, something happened that still shakes historians today. In modern Iraq, where the Tigris and Euphrates flow, a sudden civilization rose almost overnight. They called themselves the Black-Headed Ones. We know them as the Sumerians. Now here's the thing. This wasn't some slow climb from hunting and gathering. Other cultures needed thousands of years to develop writing, laws, and astronomy. But in Sumer, it all seemed to explode at once. Villages transformed into vast city-states, Eridu, Uruk, Ur, and at the heart of it all, mud. But this wasn't just any mud. The Sumerians saw potential that no one else did. They baked it into bricks, built entire cities with it. They shaped it into vessels, tokens for trade. But the real breakthrough, they used it to create memory. They invented cuneiform, wedge-shaped marks pressed into clay tablets. And that changed everything. For the first time, humans could record thoughts permanently. Not just grain counts or tax lists, though those mattered, but royal decrees, contracts, poetry, and entire stories. Stories that would outlive their creators by millennia. And get this, when they started writing numbers, they didn't mess around. They used a base 60 system. And the truth is, we still live with that legacy today. 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 360 degrees in a circle. That level of mathematical precision, it was baked into their mud tablets thousands of years ago. But here's where it gets strange. The more scholars dug through those tablets, the more unexpected stuff they found. Nestled between records of barley shipments and beer recipes were references to ritual medicine, odd astronomical notes, even whispers of knowledge that seemed way ahead of its time. Now, fast forward to today. Tens of thousands of those clay tablets are sitting in museums and storage rooms around the world. But reading them, that's been brutal. One tablet might have over 1,000 unique signs. Each sign can mean different things depending on context. It used to take scholars a lifetime just to get decent at reading this stuff. Only a tiny group of experts could even try. And that's where AI changes the game. In Munich, researchers started using machine learning to digitally piece together broken tablets. Think of it like solving the world's oldest and hardest jigsaw puzzle. At first, the AI could only match fragments, but it learned fast. Soon, it could recognize writing patterns, isolate texts, and even read across different scribes and styles spanning centuries. By 2023, teams at Tel Aviv and Ariel University had built an AI that could translate Akkadian, the language of many cuneiform tablets, into English almost instantly. Stuff that used to take years now took hours. As Big Think put it, it was like combining Google Translate with a time machine. And just as this tech was getting scary good, the archaeologists struck gold, figuratively. New digs revealed tablets in such pristine condition that they could serve as master texts to help verify the AI's translations. Up in northern Iraq, at a site called Kurd Kalstan, they uncovered a cache of tablets dating back to around 1800 BCE. But researchers suspect these were actually transcribed versions of even older originals. Around this same time, another site, Girsu, one of the earliest Sumerian cities, coughed up more than 200 untouched cuneiform tablets, along with 60 cylinder seals. The kicker? These finds were preserved in bitumen-lined containers, which protected them from moisture and damage. And because these tablets referenced even earlier events, many historians now think they hold knowledge from the dawn of Sumer itself. But the story wasn't slowing down. By 2025, new tools from Würzburg University were pushing the limits even further. They could now detect idioms, technical terms, subtle meanings that human translators had missed for decades. But what was it saying? Well, turns out those strange astronomical notes weren't just random observations. The tablets show detailed records of planetary motion, solstices, and even hints of Earth's precession. A subtle wobble in the planet's rotation that modern astronomers only fully understood in recent times. So, were the Sumerians tracking cosmic cycles spanning tens of thousands of years? The data says yes, but it didn't stop with the stars. The revelations kept coming. In medicine, the tablets described antiseptics, trauma treatments, even pulse diagnostics. They recorded family health data in ways that suggested an understanding of inherited traits, something genetics wouldn't formally explain until the modern era. And then, things got electric, literally. Some tablets described copper and iron vessels immersed in acidic liquids. The words they used? Currents, spark, powerful glow. Sound familiar? The so-called Baghdad battery, an ancient artifact found millennia later, matches this description almost exactly. Were the Sumerians experimenting with electricity thousands of years ago? Whether it was by accident or design, they were documenting processes that line up eerily well with modern electrical concepts. But the biggest twist? It wasn't just about science. Some of the darkest, strangest references in the tablets talk about stones that scorch the earth and poison fields, buried deep to contain their danger. Today, we know about desert glass, fused quartz formed by extreme heat, possibly from meteor impacts or something else. Could those ancient stones be connected? Some researchers think so. Others whisper of lost technologies or weapons that defy easy explanation. And that's where the myth part comes crashing in. The Anunnaki. You've probably heard that name before. In early Sumerian myth, they were cosmic judges, spiritual beings. But in modern fringe theories, popularized by Zecharia Sitchin, they become ancient astronauts. According to Sitchin, the Anunnaki came from a distant planet called Nibiru over 400,000 years ago. Their mission? To mine Earth's gold. And to do that, they supposedly engineered humans as a labor force through genetic manipulation. Outlandish? Maybe. But here's the thing. AI is starting to pick up weird technical language buried in the mythic passages. References to energy vessels, divine codes, sealed chambers with breathable air. Terms that sound a little too engineered to dismiss outright. But let's hold on to that for a second. We'll touch on it soon. And those mu, once thought to mean divine boats or flying chariots, now they're revealing details like airflow systems, sealed cabins, protective coverings. Are we reading distorted accounts of ancient technology? The more AI translates, the blurrier that line becomes. Before we dive any deeper, though, if you haven't already hit that subscribe and like button, go ahead and run that up real quick. Show love before we move on. The origin of human race. But the story of Sumer isn't just about stars and flying chariots. It's about us. And their tablets don't whisper about human origins. They shout it. Texts like the Atrahasis and Eridu Genesis pull no punches. They say humanity was created, not by chance, not by nature, but by design. So here's the setup. The way these tablets tell it, there was a full-on rebellion in the heavens. The lesser gods, called the Igigi, were sick of doing manual labor. And when they finally revolted, the higher gods, the Anunnaki, needed replacements, fast. Their solution? Whip up a brand new being, one that could take orders and handle the hard work. And how'd they do it? According to the tablets, by crafting a human from clay and what they called divine essence. And they gave this first human a name, Adamu. Sound familiar? Yeah, you're not alone. The parallels to later religious texts are a little hard to miss. But that's not even the weirdest part. At first, These humans were apparently a mess, sterile, not too bright, basically not ready for prime time. So what did they do? They tweaked them over and over again until they finally got it right, humans who could reproduce and get to work. Now here's where things start to sound a little less like myth and a lot more like a lab project. Thanks to AI, we're picking up phrases buried in these ancient lines like essence mixture, prototype yield, reproductive capacity. And naturally, this is where ancient astronaut theorists start leaning in hard, because they point to modern genetic oddities, like the sudden fusion of human chromosome 2, as potential leftovers from ancient tinkering. Did someone out there mess with us? Mainstream scientists say no. But the debate? Oh, it's far from over. And speaking of ancient visitors, here comes one of the most controversial parts of the whole story. Nibiru. Yeah, Zecharia Sitchin's infamous theory. He claimed the Anunnaki came from a distant planet on a wild looping orbit, one that takes 3,600 years to circle the sun. According to him, they first showed up about 450,000 years ago. And every time Nibiru swung by Earth, it triggered waves of civilizational rise and fall. Now, whether you believe that or not, here's the thing. Sumerian tablets do record cataclysms. Big ones, massive floods, droughts, climate disasters. And they often tie these events to strange celestial happenings, red skies, reversed rivers, stars that predator the land. So, were they talking about Nibiru? Or just natural disasters viewed through a cosmic lens? And this is where AI starts making things even messier, because it's showing that many of these old tablets don't just tell wild stories. They read like survival guides. But let's leave that aside for a second, because there's another part of the story that remains just as strange to this day. The Sumerian king list. Their king list, which is basically this ancient document where they recorded who ruled and for how long, doesn't exactly begin with guys sitting on thrones for 40 years and then retiring. No, the first king, Alulim. His reign supposedly lasted 28,800 years. The next one, Dumuzid, 36,000. Now fast forward through the list, and later kings ruled for more reasonable lengths, hundreds of years instead of thousands. But even that is not exactly normal. Mainstream scholars, of course, say these are just symbolic numbers. They're meant to show divine authority. You know, our king's so great he basically ruled forever. But others? They think something else was going on entirely, and that's where the rabbit hole opens up. Could these kings have literally been hybrids? Part human, part something else. Specifically, the Anunnaki. Now let's throw some archaeology on the fire. There's this tomb in Queen Puabi's tomb, dated around 2600 BC, and when they opened it, yeah, they found a skull that didn't quite match what you'd expect. No, it wasn't like the cranial deformation you see in some ancient cultures, you know, where they bind the head to make it look a certain way. This skull was naturally elongated. That's not supposed to happen. And nearby? Skeletal remains that stood over 7 feet tall, which in Sumerian populations is super rare. I mean, even today that's rare. So were these just random genetic outliers? Or were they physical traces of something more? Now here's where the ancient texts get even weirder. The Sumerians were obsessed with blood purity. Over and over again they talk about the seed of Anu. And they weren't just writing poetry. These guys had dynastic marriages, strict rituals and laws, all designed to preserve a very specific bloodline, and it wasn't unique to them. This idea pops up all over the ancient world. Egyptian pharaohs said they were descended from gods. Inca rulers claimed they came from the sun. Even Tibetan Dalai Lamas are chosen as reincarnations of divine beings. But the Sumerians? They may have been the first to write it all down. And here's where it gets tricky. The Sumerian language is loaded with words that can mean a lot of different things depending on the context, like the word me. It can mean a divine decree. It can mean a cultural concept. It can even mean a physical object. That's led to some pretty wild interpretations over the years. Zecharia Sitchin, for example, claimed some of these texts described power-packed objects, One of his big claims? That tablet VA 243 was actually a star map. Except, yeah, no, that one's been debunked. Turns out it's just a simple dedication, not an astronomical chart. The strange warning. But the Sumerians didn't just leave us cool myths and clay tablets about gods and kings. They left us warnings, serious ones. You might think they were talking about a single great flood or some big disaster story, but that's not it. The Sumerians talked about cycles, patterns, whole ages of prosperity rising and then collapsing over and over again. It's all written right into their star records. And here's where it gets weird. AI is now connecting those ancient patterns with real-world climate disasters we already know about. Take the 4.2 kilo-year drought, total collapse of civilizations, or the sudden fall of the Akkadian Empire. Famines, mass migrations. We've got scientific evidence of these events. But in the tablets, they describe it in a whole different way. Red skies, a black sun, stars that predator the land, rivers literally reversing course. For a long time, scholars just brushed this off as poetry. You know, ancient people trying to sound dramatic about natural disasters. But now AI is flagging these as descriptions of possible real celestial events, which raises a pretty big question. Were the Sumerians seeing something up there we've forgotten about down here? And just when you think you've hit the weirdest part, the Sumerians had their own League of Gods. The League of Gods. And I'm not talking about the Anunnaki this time. That's the surface level stuff. Once you peel that back, you find a pantheon that could rival any modern fantasy universe. I mean, they had gods for storms, healing, the moon, scribes, even specific winds, and those are just the ones we know about. So let's start with the big guy, Enlil. This dude wasn't just a wind god. He literally split heaven from earth. That's how his myth begins. And get this, Enlil was so sacred that not even the other gods dared look him in the face. He ruled from a massive temple called Ikur in Nippur and basically ran everything from agriculture to kingship to the laws of existence themselves. We're talking about celestial executive power here. Now, Enki, he was the trickster, god of fresh water, wisdom, and creation. The kind of cosmic engineer you'd want on your side. His story? He took down his own father, shaped the world, and supposedly gave humans the power of intellect and magic. The guy was basically the ancient version of a genius inventor. And fun twist, his sister Gatumdug was a goddess of healing and fertility. Not a household name today, but back then, she was invoked during childbirth and wellness rituals. A nurturing force often overshadowed by the flashier myths. Then things get spicy. Enter Inanna, later known as Ishtar. This goddess was all about love, war, political power, and raw, unapologetic ambition. Her symbol was an 8-pointed star, and her myths, wild. One story has her descending into the underworld to take over her sister's domain. She ended up dying, hung on a nail, and was only brought back to life by trading her own husband's life. Some scholars think that the whole narrative was an early way to explain the cycle of seasons, death in winter, rebirth in spring. But it doesn't stop there. Utu, also called Shamash, was the sun god, born of Nana and Ningal. He wasn't just about light. He brought justice and law, literally illuminating truth as he traveled across the sky each day. And his sister, Nana, the moon goddess, was so revered that one of history's first known authors, Enheduanna, was a high priestess in her cult. The first named author in recorded history was a woman writing hymns to a moon goddess. That's just incredible. And tucked away in the myths is Ninimah. Hardly anyone talks about her, but she was Enlil's scribe, a librarian of the gods, midwife to humanity's creation, and a healer. Think about that. A goddess who was basically the keeper of cosmic knowledge. Definitely deserves more credit. Now it gets even deeper. And the Sky Father was seen as the ultimate ancestor, sometimes represented as a celestial bull. His partner, Kai, the Earth Mother, had a myth so bold it might have been whispered rather than shouted. Their union with their own child, Enlil, supposedly created all life on Earth. Some believe this wasn't just about fertility, but a cosmic metaphor for the interconnectedness of life itself. And then there's Anzu, a giant thunderbird who straight up stole the tablets of destiny from Enlil. These weren't just symbols. These were literal objects of divine power. The fight to retrieve them became the stuff of legend, depending on where you heard it. Either Ninurta or Marduk brought the bird down. But here's the thing. By the time the Babylonians rolled out their epic creation myth, the Enuma Elish, the Sumerian pantheon had ballooned to more than 300 deities. And the deeper researchers dig into those ancient clay tablets, the more names they find. Dozens of gods barely known today, many waiting in museum archives, half translated, their stories incomplete. And here's a wild theory. Some scholars think there may have been local gods tied to specific natural phenomena. One god for a particular spring, another for reeds in a marsh, even for individual winds. Meaning, every new fragment we find could introduce an entirely forgotten god. Now, before you think this is just some neat collection of stories, here's where it gets tricky. Unlocking Sumerian myth isn't about flipping through a complete book. It's more like trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Most of what we know comes from clay tablets, many of them shattered or worn away by time. Scholars have to piece together a single story from fragments found in different places, sometimes written centuries apart. And even when they do, the language itself throws curveballs. Cuneiform writing is crazy complicated. A single syllable could be carved 25 different ways. Add in shifts between Sumerian, Akkadian, and Neo-Babylonian dialects, not to mention poetic language and layered metaphors, and every translation becomes a high-stakes game of interpretation. And you know what's even crazier? For a long time, Western scholars brushed off many of these gods as irrelevant, primitive, regional quirks. Entire deities were ignored or miscategorized. Even the famous myth of Inanna's descent into the underworld wasn't fully pieced together until the 1900s, and it took decades for scholars to reconstruct its full arc. Were the Sumerians secret scientists? Witnesses to something out of this world? Or is our modern lens twisting ancient truths? The deeper we dig, the stranger it gets. What do you think those glowing jewels and sparking rods really were? Drop your thoughts below. I read every comment. And if you want more stories that'll keep you questioning everything you thought you knew, hit that subscribe button. More is coming.